On August 29, 1907, 75 men went to work on what was supposed to be the greatest bridge ever built. By the end of that day, most of them were dead, and the bridge they were standing on had vanished into the St. Lawrence River in just 15 seconds. This is the story of the Quebec Bridge, and if you've never heard of it, that's honestly part of the problem, because what happened here didn't just kill workers. It exposed a catastrophic flaw in how engineers thought about their own work. The conventional story is that this was just a tragic accident, a miscalculation, something that just happened. But the real story is more disturbing than that. There were warnings, clear ones, and they were ignored. So what we're going to do today is walk through the whole thing, the dream, the design, the disaster, and what it took for the engineering world to finally reckon with what went wrong. By the end of this, you'll understand why the Quebec Bridge is still taught in engineering schools today, and why it should be. Let's start at the beginning. In the late 1800s, Quebec City had a problem. The St. Lawrence River cut right through the heart of eastern Canada, and if you wanted to cross it near Quebec City, you were either taking a ferry or going a very long way around. For a country that was rapidly industrializing, moving goods, building railways, connecting cities, that was a serious obstacle. The Canadian government knew they needed a bridge, not just any bridge, a bridge long enough to span one of the widest, most powerful river crossings on the continent. The distance between the two shores at the chosen crossing point near Quebec City was enormous. The river there is deep, fast, and brutal in winter. Ice flows the size of buildings crash through it every year. Any bridge built here would have to be massive, strong, and unlike anything ever attempted before. The solution they landed on was a cantilever bridge. And if you're not sure what that means, picture two giant arms reaching out from opposite shores toward each other, each one anchored at its base and extending out over the water without any support underneath. Then a central span connects the two arms in the middle. It's an elegant idea. You don't need to build supports from the riverbed, which is incredibly difficult in deep, fast water. The structure holds itself up through the balance of tension and compression in the steel. When it works, it's a marvel of physics. When something goes wrong, there's nothing underneath to catch it. The Quebec Bridge was designed to have the longest cantilever span in the world, longer than the fourth bridge in Scotland, which had held that record since 1890. This wasn't just an infrastructure project. It was a statement. Canada was announcing itself to the world as a nation capable of building something extraordinary. The man chosen to lead the design was Theodore Cooper, one of the most respected bridge engineers in North America at the time. Cooper had decades of experience, he had a strong reputation, and he was given enormous authority over the project, which, as it turned out, was part of the problem. Cooper's design called for massive steel trusses, the interlocking framework of steel members that would carry the load of the bridge. As the design evolved, the span of the bridge was actually increased beyond the original plan. And here's where the first critical mistake was made. When the span got longer, the bridge got heavier. A lot heavier. But the calculations used to determine how strong each steel member needed to be were not updated to reflect that extra weight. The numbers used were based on the original, shorter design. This wasn't a small rounding error. The bridge was significantly heavier than the design accounted for. Every steel member, every beam, every cord, every connection was being asked to carry more load than it was built for, and nobody caught it. Or more accurately, the people who might have caught it weren't in a position to stop what was already in motion. Cooper, despite being the lead engineer, rarely visited the construction site. He was based in New York, communicating mostly by letter and telegram. The on-site engineer was a younger man named Norman McClure, who was competent but had far less authority than Cooper. The company building the bridge, the Phoenix Bridge Company, had its own engineers, and the Canadian government had oversight responsibility too. What you had was a situation where everyone assumed someone else was checking the critical numbers, and nobody actually was. Construction began in earnest in the early 1900s, and by the summer of 1907, the bridge was taking shape. Steel members were being assembled. The cantilever arms were growing out over the river. Workers, many of them from the Kanawake Mohawk community, who had become renowned for their skill and fearlessness in high steel construction, were working every day on the growing structure. And then the warnings started. In the weeks before the collapse, workers and foremen began noticing something wrong. Steel members near the base of the south cantilever arm were bending. In engineering terms, these are called compression members, pieces of steel designed to carry crushing loads. When a compression member bends, it's called buckling, and it means the steel is being asked to carry more than it can handle. It's not a subtle sign. You can see it with your eyes. Workers reported it. McClure, the on-site engineer, noticed it and was alarmed. He sent word to Cooper in New York. There were telegrams back and forth. Cooper's response was essentially to keep going. He believed the bending was within acceptable limits, that it wasn't a sign of imminent danger. Work continued. What's haunting about this is that the people closest to the bridge, the ones standing on it every day, the ones who could see the steel bending with their own eyes, knew something was wrong. But the decision-making power sat with a man hundreds of miles away who hadn't seen the bridge recently and was, at some level, too invested in the project to consider that his own design might be fatally flawed. On August 29, 1907, it was a normal workday. Crews were on the bridge, the sun was going down, and at around 5:30 in the evening, the south cantilever arm failed. The collapse happened in about 15 seconds. Thousands of tons of steel, the lower cord of the south arm, buckled suddenly and catastrophically. The entire structure came apart. Workers had no time to run, no time to react. 75 men died. Many of them fell into the river with the steel. Some bodies were never recovered. It was the deadliest bridge construction disaster in North American history. The investigation that followed was thorough and, to the government's credit, brutally honest. A royal commission was appointed, and their findings were damning. The bridge had been too heavy for its own design. The steel members were undersized for the actual load they were carrying. The original calculations had never been properly updated when the span was lengthened. And critically, the oversight structure, the chain of responsibility between Cooper, the Phoenix Bridge Company, and the Canadian government, had failed completely. Everyone had assumed someone else was checking the work. Cooper was found to have made the central error, but the commission also made clear that the system itself was broken. There was no independent verification of the calculations. There was no requirement for engineers to take personal, legal responsibility for their designs. There was no culture of stop everything and check when warning signs appeared. The bridge failed not just because of a math error, but because of a professional culture that didn't have the right safeguards in place. Cooper never worked on another major project. His reputation was destroyed. He died in 1919, 2 years after the bridge he had designed was finally completed by other people using a corrected design. Now here's where the story gets even more remarkable, because Canada didn't walk away from the project. They redesigned the bridge from scratch. A new commission of engineers reviewed everything. The steel members were recalculated. A new, heavier, and stronger design was approved. And in 1913, construction began again. This time, the approach was more careful, more methodical. The lessons of 1907 were fresh in everyone's minds. The new design used a different approach for the central span. Rather than building it in place, they would construct it separately on the riverbank and then float it into position using pontoons, raising it up to connect with the two cantilever arms. It was a complex operation, but it avoided the need for workers to assemble the central span high above the water. By September 1916, the central span was ready. It weighed about 5,000 tons. They floated it into position beneath the bridge, attached the lifting equipment, and began raising it. And then it happened again. One of the corner castings, a metal fitting used to connect the lifting equipment to the span, failed under the load. The span dropped back into the river. 13 workers were killed. The span itself was destroyed and had to be rebuilt. It's almost impossible to imagine the weight of that moment. The engineers, the workers, the government officials watching from the shore as the central span disappeared into the St. Lawrence for the second time. After everything that had happened in 1907, after all the redesigning and the recommitting and the years of work, another piece of that bridge was at the bottom of the river. But they tried again. A new central span was built, and on September 20th, 1917, the raising operation was repeated, this time successfully. The span was lifted into place, the connections were made, and the Quebec Bridge was complete. It had taken 30 years from the original planning to completion. 88 workers had died. It had cost far more than anyone had originally imagined, in money and in human life. But it stood, and it still stands today. The Quebec Bridge is still in use, still carrying rail and road traffic across the St. Lawrence River. It held the record for the world's longest cantilever span for decades. And if you see it from the river, it is genuinely breathtaking. Thanks for watching.